25th Hour Radio Show.
You know, Joe, our show is located way over here in southern Illinois. You know, even though we're not in Kentucky, there are a ton of our listeners that claim to bleed Kentucky blue. You know, so many people, including myself, are so excited for you to be joining us today. I'd like to start off asking you how you got into the game of basketball. You know, when did you first start playing?
Oh my gosh, Rob, you're talking about ancient history.
But I'm still interested in it.
Well, like most kids, I started hanging around my older brother, kids in my neighborhood. It seemed like every kid had a goal in his driveway. Or I had one friend that had a barn behind his house that backed up to the hospital parking lot,
Okay.
which had lights. And we would play out there at his barn till we'd get whippings getting home too late for dinner. And that, you know, it was so much fun playing just pickup games in somebody's driveway, or in his case, out by that barn. And it was an ideal place to play. But the bad thing about it, those lights, you lost track of time. And I'd have to run home trying to get there by dinner time. And I got a lot of discipline for getting home late for dinner. We had a Marine that had been in the service, came back and coached our junior varsity team. He became a role model for me, and Larky Box was his name. And he kind of natured me and developed my love for the game. And I guess that I was destined to be involved in basketball all my life from that early start. I tried other things, and I loved the game of football. I played, I was a backup quarterback for my high school as a freshman. I started 3 years as quarterback and linebacker. I was captain of the team, and I would have crawled to Notre Dame to have been a Notre Dame quarterback. But my abilities were a little better in basketball, and so I followed it to Kentucky, where I found out that I wasn't as good as I thought it was, and was relegated to the bench. And after a year and a half, referred to small college down in Tennessee, Sewanee.
Yeah.
And where I played out my eligibility and came back to Kentucky and got my degree.
Yeah. You know, what did it mean to you, being a native son of Kentucky, to actually be able to compete, you know, as a Wildcat, as a player for that 1 year?
Well, there's no question about it. I was there with the Fabulous Five. Mm-hmm. Alex Groza, Wawa Jones, Cliff Barker, Kenny Rollins, Ralph Beard. I was a freshman, ineligible that year. The next year, after Kenny Rollins had graduated, we still had a bankload of guards. But Coach Rupp recruited 9 freshman guards my sophomore year. And most of them were high school All-Americans, all-state players from their respective states. And I was about the 13th man on the 13-man squad. So I saw my playing time going to really diminish. But I'll tell you, Rock, being from Kentucky and following Kentucky basketball from the time I could tune in a radio, I kept score. I kept a scrapbook on Kentucky basketball when I was a kid. And I knew all of the players that then I wound up being on the squad with. And the first time I ever ran out on the floor in the old alumni gym with Kentucky across my chest and the band playing the university's fight song, I guess, was the greatest thrill that a Kentucky lad could possibly have.
I bet.
I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that thrill. And it's quite an unusual story to have been a player for Coach Rupp. And he actually got me to go to Sewanee. Mm-hmm. The coach at Sewanee had been on his staff for a year, several years before. And Coach Rupp kind of guided me to go down and play for him. And I never burned any bridges when I left Kentucky. I think Coach Rupp was glad to have my scholarship for someone else when I left. And I always stayed in communication, and he followed my coaching in high school, in college. He sent me letters of congratulations. It was an unusual friendship. Mm-hmm. And I never will forget when I was at Regis College as coach in Denver, Colorado. And we beat Hank Iba and Oklahoma State. Our little college had 650 students.
Wow. We
beat Oklahoma State when Hank Iba was the coach. So at that time, Coach Rupp and Coach Iba were in a race for the winningest coaches in the nation. Mm-hmm. And he sent me a nice letter congratulating me for beating his adversary and giving him a loss to help Coach Rupp's record stay in the lead. Then to be selected to be his assistant and later following him as head coach in Kentucky was a very unusual type situation.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. After coaching a few seasons at other colleges, you come home as an assistant to your former coach, Coach Rupp. How tough was it to convince Adolph to give you the assistant job, or was it just a perfect fit, not a tough decision at all?
I guess it was a perfect fit because 3 years before I went back, he offered me a job. I didn't go to him looking for a job. In fact, the first time he offered a job, I turned it down. Okay. And I said, Coach, he wanted me as a recruiter. And I told him, I said, Coach, if you ever want me as a floor coach, I'll come back. And 3 years later, he called me. Well, I was at a clinic in St. Louis, and he was giving the clinic presentation. And he asked me to come upstairs with him to his room. And that day he offered me the assistant's job and as a floor coach. And that's when I accepted it.
How different was it being an assistant coach under Coach Rupp as opposed to being a player?
I loved every minute of it. I got to see a different side of Coach Rupp. One that I played when I played under him. I had all the respect in the world for him, but as a assistant coach, I found a different side of Coach Rupp. One that was very easy to work for. He gave you a job to do and let you do it your way, and I really enjoyed our relationship. And really gathered a different type relationship being his assistant coach from being a player.
Yeah. When Coach Rupp decided to retire and you had the opportunity to finally be the head coach, how much pressure was on your shoulders having to succeed, the face of the Kentucky program for so many years?
It was absolutely an unbelievable time. For Coach Rupp to step down from the program that he developed and built into a national power. When he won 3 NCAA championships in 4 years. He established the Kentucky program, a tradition that would entitle it to be a national contender forever. If that tradition was upheld and continued. And I felt that responsibility of having to keep that program alive as Coach Rupp had left it. When he retired, Rob, he said that he wanted to leave a program that was built on a sound foundation, one not built on sand and would crumble and fall, but one that would last to the test of time and always be a solid program. And that's what he left.
He sure did.
And there's proof to that, Rob. 5 coaches that won national championships at Kentucky. Now, what does that tell you about a program, about a tradition, about fan support, about administrative support, and especially the fans? The fans are so loyal and so outward in their support of the program that it just makes for a recruiting, just a haven for recruiting. And every door that you knock on is open. Every kid is interested in the Kentucky program, and the facilities are the best. So it's just kind of a no-brainer that 5 coaches, including Coach Rupp, myself, Rick Pitino, Tubby Smith, and now Calipari, have all won national championships at Kentucky. And a good coach that comes in here and is willing to work at it, to let the program lead itself, they're going to win a national championship.
Well, speaking of the national championship, let's rewind a little bit to the 77-78 season when you won the national title. Was you able to finally breathe that big sigh of relief, knowing you solidified your legacy in Kentucky basketball history?
I certainly did. And it is obvious that that's the breakover point of following Coach Rupp, was to win that championship. It had been 20 years. 1958 had been the last championship. I took over in 1972, and in 6 years I'd been to the Final Four, the final game against UCLA in 75, and then came back, won the NIT in 76, and then was nationally ranked in the top 5 in 77, and then 78. We were ranked number 1 to start of the season. We had that monkey on our back for the entire year and came through and won it all in 78. Yes, that sequence of those 3 or 4 years really took the pressure off.
Mm-hmm. What did you enjoy most, playing or coaching?
I loved every minute of my association with Kentucky basketball, both as a fan, as a young kid, and then being able to wear the jersey and represent the school, and then come back as Coach Rupp's successor. It just was unbelievable lifetime. I loved every minute of it. The pressures were different to me than they would have been to any other coach. Now, no coach since me has had the pressure that I had following Coach Rupp.
Yeah.
That was an unreal position to be put into. But I'd been his assistant for 7 years. I'd seen everything. I knew what to expect. I was well aware of the position I was in. I never tried to fill his shoes or eliminate his shadow from the program. I've always given Coach Rupp the credit for this program. And what he built and the way he left it for me was the best situation that a coach could have. And if you could withstand the pressure of following a legend, then you could be successful.
You know, we got a couple listener questions, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, sure.
You know, we got a listener named Aaron Conley, and he writes in and he asks, you know, what are your thoughts on the one and done deal? You know, where student athletes who excel in the sport leave early to play pro.
Well, I'm like most of the coaches. I totally think it's messed up college basketball in one respect. It's a pressure on those kids to have to go to college when they're already courted by the pros. I think they ought to let them go right out of high school if they're good enough. If they're not good enough, I think they should do like football and baseball. I think they should stay 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And if they want to choose to stay and get their degree at that time, they can. If they want to go on into the pros and make some money, they can come back for 1 year and get their degree, and I think most of them would do that. But I think the one and done is an unfair, not an unfair, an unwise setup for both the kids and the schools. Maybe it benefits the professional league. I don't know.
You know, this question right here from a guy named David Hubbard is going to kind of test the politician in you, kind of put you on the spot. You know, he asked, was the 77-78 team your favorite team to coach?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Any group of boys that could stay that focused, and they did. The bulk of that squad went through the finals in 75 in San Diego when we lost to UCLA in the finals in John Wooden's last game as a coach. And they were freshmen. Roby, Phillips, Gibbons, and Lee, those four leaders were freshmen. They came on, and the next year they won the NIT. They had a great year in 77. It was just building up to their having the dedication, the focus, the determination, the discipline to win it all. And I so appreciated their mature attitude going into that season. Every practice was just a coach's dream. The attention to detail, the cooperation, the teamwork, the ability of that team to face any kind of game plan, slow down, fast break, full court pressure, zone defenses. They were ready for anything that came up, and they could adjust to anything. And it was a joy to coach that team. But I enjoyed all my teams for one reason or another. They were all a great bunch of kids that felt the support of the fans and the importance of the tradition and their sincerity in keeping up that tradition.
You know, I got one final question for you, Joe.
Yes, sir.
What was it like going to the Coal Lodge and seeing yourself sitting there as a statue?
That was the most unreal feeling that a person can have. I got a picture here in my studio of Dan Issel and Merlin Noel sitting next to my statue. Now, is that a total compliment?
I read somewhere, I think I quoted, someone quoted you as saying that the pigeons were going to like it.
Well, they like it probably better than anybody. But Coach John Calipari, I think he's got somebody assigned to keep it clean.
Well, that's good.
And
That's
I
good.
appreciate that.
Well, Joe, man, thank you so much for honoring us today and taking time out and joining us on the show.
Well, I enjoyed visiting with you, Rob. Thank you for including me.
Thank you, and you have a nice day, sir.
You too. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The 25th Hour Radio Show.